Bob Carr here for another episode of the Bob Carr Show, and joining me in the studio today is Mr. Chris Mann from Mahon Plumbing. Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Bob. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm ready to strangle your father, though.
I've heard a little bit about it.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a side joke we were talking about before we got on air. What's the challenges you guys running across working with when you're hiring a new plumber, a new tech?
We see mostly now that there's no young talent coming out of school or out of trade schools or even just getting into the industry. And if they are, most of them, for whatever reason, don't want to take the time to get their licenses, things like that. And there's a lot of jobs that they can't go on without the proper licenses, or they have to go with one of our technicians who has the license and they can work underneath of them. But it just limits what they're able to do. So you see they'll come in and just say, for example, they want to make $50 an hour. That's great, but do you have the certifications to back it up, right? Yes, you can do the work, but at the end of the day, you still have to be licensed to do it. I mean, we see now we're competing with companies that their owners don't even have the licenses.
Really?
Yeah, so they'll pay somebody else to pull permits for them. You know, if they get in a jam, they'll call someone. It's illegal, but that's what we're dealing with. So when you go out and you're competing against somebody who doesn't have a license, doesn't have insurance, you can't compete.
Gotcha.
But that's what we see a lot now.
I gotcha. So how do you guys overcome that? Are you guys actually training new plumbers, new techs?
We are. We have 2 apprentices now. So they both have their apprentice cards, and they'll go through the process of, becoming a journeyman plumber.
Do they get good attitudes? They want to learn?
They do. Both of them are very willing to learn.
Okay.
They're excited about it. They like what they do.
I met one of them. I met one of them the other day, and he was really on the ball, wanting to learn. Customer service was right on.
He's worked with us for almost 3 years now.
And that's the attitude you need to learn. You got to be positive about it, and then to be able to learn from that.
No, and it's nothing's hard, right? It's just a matter of thinking it through it logically, and you
say it's not hard, but you got the right attitude about it.
Sure.
But if you wake up in the morning and half of it's not, you know how that learning is going to be.
Right. It's all about the attitude. If you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, I always say, you're going to have a bad day. Or if you bring your problems from home into work, it's going to affect your work.
Keep work at work and home is a home.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people mix that all day.
Correct.
And then nothing gets done 100% the correct way.
Yeah.
So before we got on the air, you were talking about some homeowners that you're working with that were their own general contractor.
Yes.
So why do you think that's happening more and more now in the industry?
Well, because they're going to save the fee that they would pay a general contractor. And nowadays, everybody's their own builder, their own GC, we'll say, because of the home improvement shows. You have build.com, where everything's accessible, right? Everything's online.
So they all think that they're their own GC.
Correct.
But what's the challenge you see when you get there and you have to try to plumb out, rough out behind them or with them?
Yeah, a lot of what we see is one major issue is scheduling. They don't know who needs to be in there first. For example, the HVAC company needs to start before we do. Otherwise, they're going to come in and they're going to have to cut all the pipes out of the way. So a lot of them don't understand the process or what goes into a house, for example, or what their limitations are.
Isn't that frustrating?
It can be, yes.
How do you handle that, though? A lot of patience?
Patience, yes. So I'll always meet with them. After we give them the price and we are awarded the job, then I'll walk through the house with them. We lay everything out, show them their options, and I'll say, okay, this is what we need before we can start. We need kitchen layout, cabinet layouts for the vanities. We need all the material that you're supplying. So whether that's the rough-in valves or the trims, and that way it's there so there's no question when it comes to final.
I got a question. I interrupt you.
Go ahead.
So you're there, you're going to do your walkthrough. You've signed the contract or you're getting ready to sign. You give them the price. They okayed it. And you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, one or both, you're going to meet with them. Well, what happens when you get there and something's done ahead of time already and you're like shaking your head like, oh boy, you're not working with a respectable, like a Coke, somebody respectable in the county that you know they know how to do it the correct way. What happens when that happens though, when there's someone's a step ahead of you already and you got to backtrack and you didn't have that in your quote?
It's a tough conversation because they're expecting that number to be that number. They don't want to necessarily hear that the scope of work has changed, but that's what has to be discussed, right? A lot of times, like for example, when we did, they ripped the front porch off, and when they did that, they broke the water line. So the new water line has to be ran now. because it's old galvanized line.
And you're not going to throw that in for free.
No, and it's a lot of work at the driveway. We have to go underneath the driveway, underneath the sidewalks, because it was an existing lot. So all the infrastructure is there. They're just building on top of the old foundation. So it's a tough conversation. They understand, and I get, nobody wants to spend more money than they have to.
Jordan, they've got an X amount of budget.
Correct. But what we see is that if they take their time and follow the process correctly, you can kind of avoid a lot of these problems.
Chris, if somebody wants to get a hold of you for their project, how can they get a hold of Mahon Plumbing or you?
They can call our office at 410-766-8566, or they can send us an email at office@mahonplumbing.com.
Gotcha. Chris, I appreciate you coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
And this wraps up another episode of the Bob Carr Show, and we'll see you next week with another episode.